A very good evening to all our viewers. Welcome to Monday's edition of the Evening Review. My name is Nangula Uaandja, your host. Let's have a look at today's headlines. Tonight in the studio, we are very excited to welcome the Chief Executive Officer of the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board, Nangula Uaandja, to reflect, of course, on a number of issues, not really issues, but to reflect on the mandate of the board and to let us in on the number of activities they are embarking upon. Nangula, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Toivo. It's great to be here.
Yes. Maybe give us, from the start, in not so many words, the broader mandate of the board.
So the broader mandate of the board, I will look at it really as two items. So yes, the president has appointed me effective January, and he said that two things that we need to look at. Number one is investment promotion and development, and number two is SME development. Okay. And the focus there, we really say that the two items that we look at is from the investment promotion point of view. We want to check how much investments are coming to Namibia and how much money is flowing into Namibia as opposed to money flowing out of Namibia. So we will measure our success by really looking at what is happening with our trade account and how much are we bringing in compared to what we are losing as a country. With regard to MSME development, I think as indicated in His Excellency's announcement last year on the 16th of March, he said that MSMEs have got a potential for job creation. And therefore, as we bring in investment, we want to make sure that those investments are able to filter through. Because if you've got a larger investment, that larger investment might be able to create, for example, 1,000 direct jobs. But if the MSMEs are able to flow into the supply chain, then they create more jobs, and therefore there will be more opportunities for indirect jobs. So we will measure our access in the MSME space based on the number of jobs that we are able to create. So then we have got a number of other departments that will support that, but really the mandate is investment promotion and development, MSMEs development, and then everything else that we do is about supporting those two areas.
Indeed. And you've been in the office not for too long, of course, but you've been there, you said, since January. What has been your assessment of the job at hand, actually, that awaits you?
Yeah, so it's actually a lot at hand. So I've been there since January, but it has been more or less like 3 of us until 1 April. So most of the team members joined us 1 April. And the people that joined us were former employees of the Namibia Investment Center, as well as the former employees of the SME Development Division from the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade. And then we appointed quite a number of new guys that joined us. Mostly we appointed our executive effective 1 April. We were on the last round of appointment, so around about 1 September, 15 September, we'll have our last intake of staff. We expect our complement to be about 65. Okay. So yes, the job at hand is significant, and what makes it significant is really because we want to bring coordination. So what we do when we face investors, they ask a number of questions, and their understanding is somewhat limited as to the investment landscape in Namibia. So you have got investors that are coming with their opportunities, and when they come there for opportunities, they say, I've identified an area to invest in Namibia, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in tourism, whether it's in manufacturing, whether it is in mining. And now they need to go through the processes. Now we have got a lot of processes processes. For example, if you want to start a business in Namibia, you must register a company, you must do an environmental impact assessment, then you must get this certificate, then you must get this approval. And therefore, what we do is facilitating for them to get those approvals from the various ministries. And then there are also others that are coming and say, we understand Namibia is a good country. We want to come and invest in Namibia. What are the investment opportunities? And what we then need to do as a board is work with, whether it is private sector, whether it's public sector, to find out what are the investment opportunities in Namibia, in agriculture, in tourism, and in other areas. And that is the place where we are lagging a bit, because there are so many investors that are knocking on our door for us to help them with facilitation services and for us to help evaluate and see whether the projects are viable and whether government should support those projects by giving various approvals. We are not spending enough time on the proactiveness of coming up with projects. However, as we had a discussion recently on Talk of the Nation with the Director General of the National Planning Commission and the Minister of Finance, they said diversification strategy, which we have now identified areas of focus where we will be driving investment. And we will see that in the next month, the board will start driving that. So, but then the other areas that really keep us working is people who come and say, I want to invest. What are the incentives? And then there is not a clear incentive regime at this stage. So we are working with the Minister of Industrialization and Trade and Ministry of Finance and saying, how do we we come up with incentives now that we do not have a PZ regime, we do not have manufacturing regime, and the special economic zone is in process. It will be here maybe like in a year or 2 years. What do we do in the interim? And therefore understanding the regulatory climate and everything that investors need to comply with is what we are trying to say. How do we make everything into a process so that when an investor enters our door, we'll be able to tell them the process from A to Z and to be able to bring everybody together so that the investors themselves don't have to say, okay, process A is this one, then I go to who? Process B is this one, then I go to. So we need to identify the processes to them and bring all the people that are involved in that processes to the investor so that they can provide the solution. And then, of course, in the MSME sectors, we identified 3 areas. MSME says market access is a challenge for us, and we have been struggling for quite a number of years to get our product on the shelf. And then they tell us funding. There is a lot of funding available, but it's not easily accessible. So how do we get funding? And then, of course, there's many people who say, we want to support MSMEs, but their delivery is a challenge. The quality is a challenge. And you find out because of the other challenges, many people that are working in MSMEs are not full-time. They work somewhere else, and therefore they find it challenging to meet their obligation. So that is really what the challenges are. So we need to start with putting processes in place and creating structures that can help enable the areas that we are serving.
Indeed. You spoke about facilitation of all these processes as they relate to investment. And this is exactly what people are talking about, this Ostora concept.
Yes.
You know, people thinking that if the board is delving into the retail space, it is trivializing a very important mandate of attracting investment. As a matter of fact, people think that the board should really be at the highest level of operation, policy, harmonizing all these regimes that you spoke about, so that you really have a one-stop shop kind of structure where investment can then flow from there. Tell us about that concept of Ostora and how does it link into your broader mandate? Okay,
so I think, like I said, we have got actually, let's look at it, 2 business units, if we can put it that way. So we've got 2 business units. One business unit is investment promotion and development, and another one is MSMEs. And we have got an executive who is responsible for investment promotion, and executive who is responsible for MSMEs. So each one of them must deliver on the strategy, and each one of them have come up with their strategic goal and strategic objectives. And therefore, with each one of them, we say, identify what are the challenges that we'll try to solve. So now let's go to MSMEs. So we have got our executive in MSMEs, and we say, okay, MSMEs, what are the challenges? Okay, it is market access, it is funding, and it is ideation, just to make sure that we are coming up with a lot of ideas and making sure that, because they say you can come up with many concepts, only a few of that one will see actually kind of the light of the day. So when we come up with that one, then we say, okay, let's talk about market access. And it starts with maybe, for example, you and I. It starts with simple items. So I find out at an event, I find out somebody says, wow, this is, for example, a lip ice. It's made in Namibia. Does Namibia make lip ice? Yes, I didn't know. So the person who is making that, now that person is a MSME, but that person is now responsible for their own marketing department, their own finance department, their own human resources, their own everything, but they don't have the capital to do that. So how do you help them to focus on their product development and to support them with the market? So now the point is, the board doesn't start and say, how do we start a shop? And the board starts and say, what is the need? Okay, so we have identified that there's a need for shelf space. What happens? Over the last few years, there has been a retail charter. What has been the traction? It has been quite slow. And even if, let's say, we assume that it is there, how do I go in a shop and say, this is a Namibian product if I want to support Namibian MSMEs? So now we say, okay, the one idea that can come up is we need to create visibility for Namibian product. Now, the board itself, as we stand, I don't think we have the resources or the capacity to be running a shop. So I think that's what people...
You got 74 million or something.
No, but we don't have the capacity to be running a shop. But we believe that there is a... then we go and we understand, okay, there was an Ostora concept, which I spoke to one of the prior ED in the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade and say, long time ago, there was this concept, we don't know what happened to it, so maybe it can be revived. Okay, so we come, there is this concept, we definitely need to get that concept. So then in the strategic plan, we say that concept need to come to life and it needs to be implemented. Now we are at a place where as a board, we have not said we will open up a shop. We definitely want a Ostora concept in Namibia, and now we are going to investigate what is the best way of getting that concept implemented so that it can give market access to Namibian product. Now, I cannot tell you, no, we will implement it this way or we will implement it that way, because that is the whole purpose. So we actually had a very long discussion on it internally at our advisory board, where we discussed the concept of saying, do we want to run a shop? No, we definitely do not want to be distracted from our core mandate like everybody else by running a shop. But the point is, do we all agree there is a need for visibility of Namibian product? Yes. Do we agree that having such a concept, whether it is within another retail chain or it is an individual, a standalone one, is a good answer? Yes. Okay. Let's put the concept there, and then we will now work to find out what is the best way to implement, and that is now the work at hand.
Indeed. Tell me, Nangula, there is for a long time the narrative, especially by the public officials in the country, the minister, the president, and other senior officials, whenever they were engaging potential investors, we've been riding on the peace and stability sort of narrative. We have never really gone into the technical things like you're saying now to say, what are the incentives? Because, I mean, Botswana has peace and stability too, and so is Zambia. So what is it that separates us from the pack? Do you think that the time now is really to start getting technical and say, let's create regimes that are attracting investment to the country? I mean, the GAVAHub panel, high-level panel that birthed your board gave you also a huge amount of money that must sort of, I suppose that should be the starting point going forward. So do we need to be more technical rather than political in really attracting investments?
Yes. So the peace and stability is very good and it's important and it's a foundation. Without that foundation, it becomes quite challenging for you to attract investors. And for example, the government has engaged the Harvard Growth Lab. And one thing they tell you is that it has been proven that if you just go incentives and you do not address other matters, then you will not get anywhere. So incentives can help, but if you go incentives, you can dish out a lot of incentive, and many countries will compete in incentives, but then if you do not address other matters, it does not work. Yes. So yes, peace and stability helps Namibia. Then we need to look at it. On top of that peace and stability, what do we need to do? We need to address our bureaucratic system. So for example, if somebody comes to Namibia and it takes 2 years for the project to kick off, but if they go to Botswana, they get a response in 6 months, then they will choose Botswana. So how is our client investor services program or really processes? That is one thing that we need to do. What is our policy environment like? So government, I think actually government is very responsive to private sector in terms of policy. But then sometimes you look, for example, NIEB comes or NIPA comes, and when it comes, you hear, okay, the private sector is not supporting. So what happens? Then government says, okay, let's leave it there because there is still kind of disagreement between public and the private. And what we will then is to say, how do we bring the two parties together to resolve the differences sooner than later so that there can be a position, so that the law is not hanging or waiting for a long time. So policy is important. And a good environment is important. Infrastructure development is important. So there is a lot of other things that are supporting. And then yes, then you come to incentives. But the other items you need to address. And therefore what we look, for example, there are 2 reports that are issued globally. One is the competitiveness, a global competitiveness report. And you look at and if you look at the global competitiveness report, if you compare Namibia to other African countries, we're not doing that bad, but we are not differentiated. So South Africa does well because they've got a larger market than us, and they do well, for example, in infrastructure. But Namibia and Botswana are more or less at the same area, and I think we are doing maybe 1 or 2 points above a country like Rwanda. But when it comes to ease of doing business, Rwanda just plays circles around us. So they get rated like number 2 in Africa, and they get rated number 38 in the world, and we get rated 104 in the world. So while the competitiveness is more or the same, and yes, Namibia has got peace and stability, which is good, it's not easy to do business. That is the perception, and therefore those are the areas. So we are looking at those studies and saying, how do we respond to the challenges that have been identified in those studies?
Indeed. I was actually going to address you on the ease of doing business, because it seems to be a long-standing issue in Namibia, but I think you have touched on it. Let's talk about NIEF. You recently expressed your views about how NIEF could actually be a stumbling block of some sort if it's implemented, I suppose, in its current form. What exactly were you saying? Maybe just for the sake of our viewers.
Yeah. So I think for the sake of the viewers, I know the media likes NIEF a lot. That is what at least I found out. Because the conversation we were having, we were presenting our strategy to the president, and the last point of that strategy was really NIEF. The meeting was not about NIEF. It was really about policy. And yes, we meet with the media and they say, what is your view on NIEF? And maybe my answer was this one. I said, look, the board cannot have a view on NIEB, and the board does not have a view on NIEB. But the board is here to really bring good partnership between the public and the private sector. And therefore, what we look at it is, we understand and we agree with government that there is room for NIEB. So, and when I presented our strategy last week, is the point of saying Namibia is regarded as one of the upper middle income country group, which means our GDP per capita is considered to be sufficient enough for all Namibians to be taken care of. However, we are the second most unequal country in the world, and reports that come today said we have got the second highest unemployment in the world, and those need to be addressed. But now you have got development agencies and development partners who are saying, if we need to give money, we cannot bring money to Namibia, because Namibia, you've got enough. Just find a way of sharing among yourself. If you share nicely among yourself, you should be able to look after yourself, because you actually have got sufficient GDP to look after yourself. Now we look back and we say, okay, For about 10 years up to 2015, Namibia was growing very well. So if we were growing fast, and our growth has been in excess of 4 to 5%, why is that growth not shared fairly or equitably among Namibians? Why did it not filter down? And I think that is the point of government of saying we cannot continue to grow in an unequal manner. If we are continuing to grow, then that growth must be inclusive, it must reach others. And therefore, going forward, when we are promoting growth, we need to bring about a law that will compel companies and investors to make sure that that filters down. Yeah. And it filters down. Now they go to, why do they go on a race basis? Because if you look at the income levels of Namibia, it does tell that if you look at, and it's considered from a language group point of view, it does look like Namibians of African descent, from a language point of view, have got the their earnings per month. It's about $400 while Namibians of European descent language groups, they've got, let's say, about 700 up to 1,800. So there is definitely disparities there. And yes, we have had a post, and therefore government decided because of that one, we need to bring about a law that will compel countries. Now, the private sector, some people say no, other people say we understand. And actually that law, we agree. There's actually many people like larger players in the private sector say, so we agree. However, there is 1, 2, 3 or areas that if they are implemented in that way, it will not, NIPDB will not achieve the desired result. Now the board, what is doing is we have gone to the private sector and say, give us those areas. They've spoken to us, and we go to government and say, government, this is what you want to achieve. They're reading the way it looks like it might not achieve because of A, B, C, D, and government is taking that input. So the Prime Minister, the bill has actually been delayed because the Prime Minister has given us an opportunity to get the input from the private sector, and the Prime Minister, the Office of the Prime Minister, is now considering that input, and we have so far had quite a number of meetings with them for them to put that input, and I'm comfortable that they are listening and they are seeing how they can accommodate that input.
Indeed. I'm asking that because we know, okay, we don't know, but we are hearing, for example, that the acquisition of Irindi, which is one of the money that is being talked about, there is huge money. Yeah. Despite the voices of dissent that are opposed to the transaction. Yeah. We are hearing, for example, in the media that the Mexican billionaire is playing wait and see until there's proper clarity on this NIPDB thing, because he's afraid that you invest, you pump millions into the economy, and then the policy comes out in a way that disadvantages you as an investor. Yeah. So that is really the background. But maybe as we wind down, Nangula, let's talk quickly about the public-private partnership initiative. I think it is quite a new concept in Namibia, and so far it has worked quite well. Seeing especially for you that is pushing for that interface between the private and public space. Is it what is your perception of it? Is it something that we actually must hammer more on and get into these arrangements more, or what is your perception as a board of PPPs?
Yes. So they say, normally, like I say, of course, we are Namibians and we've got views. Yeah. The board, normally as a board, is here to promote that. But one of the mandates that His Excellency has given us is really to say we must work with other institutions to promote dialogue between the public and the private sector. And really, government is there to act as an enabler, and private sector creates jobs. But we also know that Namibia is a mixed economy where both are supposed to play. Normally, where you look at it, and this is now my personal view, I normally say that because of the profit motive of private sector, they normally have efficiency. Because they've got a profit motive, they come with efficiency. But because of government development objective, they come with a social agenda. I just believe that if you bring the two, one is really focusing on saying this project that we will enter into, from an efficiency point of view, will it give us return? And the other one will come and say, this project that we're entering into, will it make social impact? I think then you have got both covered. When it is only one person who's saying profit motive, in years there is sustainable development goals for me to consider, then you might not necessarily look after the social aspect. Or if you've got somebody who's considering social and they do not look at the profit motive, then maybe you will end up with losses that are not really kind of the losses that you would not want to have achieved. And that's why I believe that when you bring the two together, one has got a main focus on this, not that they don't care about the other one has got a main focus on this, but they also concern about the other one, then I think you kind of bring the almost like the really the benefit of both worlds into the equation. And that's why I believe that PPPs and public-private dialogue is very, very important for Namibia.
The final question then to me, Nangula, is the arrival of the investment board. The timing is quite challenging, given the obvious challenges that our country is facing. Not only the country, as a matter of fact, it's a global challenge now. The pandemic, the recession, everything. Everybody is tightening their belts and really consolidating their operations, and that, I suppose, makes your job difficult. I sympathize with the president sometimes. Coming into office at the time of drought, then came recession, then came COVID-19. By the time his 10 years in office come to an end, we are likely to see the effect of that. So in your case, it's mostly recession and the pandemic. How difficult is your job in light of those two challenges?
Maybe our job is difficult, but it's also a little bit easier. Because what I see is, right now, there is, I think, a lot of money around the world that is looking for a good home. All we have to do is make Namibia a good home for such investment. And what we have experienced at this stage is that we even with this pandemic, we have not been sitting around. There has been a lot of inquiries, investors that are coming. So it does give us a good timing. Almost like the COVID part gives us a little bit of quietness for us to make sure that we put processes and plans in place, but the demand and the need is quite huge. So I think actually we come almost like at the right time, because we are at a place where everybody agrees the status quo is not good and we cannot allow it to happen. So that, I think, in principle, as long as we can prove that we will be able to deliver on our mandate, I believe that we'll have the support of the government. I believe that we'll get the support of the Namibian populace if we can show them that we are able to bring about job creation. And I think we will be able to show that, yes, it's not tomorrow, it's not the day after tomorrow, but I really see a lot of opportunities that are sitting and knocking at our doors, and a lot of opportunities for Namibia specifically for us to reach out. So I really do believe that there's a lot of opportunity. Yes, getting to investors is a bit of challenge because of COVID, but I don't think that will stand in our way. So yes, and the fruit, like you say, with the president, I think he's investing now, and if he's got, let's say, maybe just over 3 years left of his term, if we start the work today, of course, the point is that you start the work today and Namibians want the result tomorrow. Unfortunately, it cannot be like that. But hopefully, it's like step by step, we will be able to get there. And really, we want to hold ourselves accountable on a quarterly basis, on a half-yearly basis, and that's why for now we have set a strategy of saying 24 months. What can we do to make our country to start looking much different from what it looks today in terms of inequalities and in terms of unemployment and poverty?
Indeed, Nangula, thank you very much for coming, and I wish you really the best of luck in your endeavor as far as your job is concerned, because so much hope hinges on your shoulders right now. If we are ever going to have job creation again in the country, employment of young people that are roaming our streets and everything, you have a huge role to play in that space by bringing companies in the country that can then take up some of these people and, of course, eventually grow the economy. So you need all the luck that you need, but we have no doubt. Your track record is well known, so we can only wish you the best, really. But thank you for coming tonight.
No, thank you. I think, like I say, definitely a lot of work lies ahead of us, and we need our fellow Namibians to support us. And really to open doors for us where they can open doors for us. We believe with that support. Normally the motto I'm working with recently is that one is too small a number to achieve greatness. So Nangula or NIPDB cannot do it. But if we get the support of other government ministries, if we get the support of the private sector, if we get the support of MSMEs and others, I believe that we will be able to do good for this country.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is Nangula Uaandja. She is Chief Executive Officer of the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board, filling us in on the latest developments at the Investment Board. Thank you for watching.